In a move to combat terrorism financing, the Nigerian Sanctions Committee, NSC, has designated 15 individuals and 2 entities for their alleged involvement in supporting terrorist activities. These designations are part of Nigeria's effort to comply with international standards on combating terrorism financing, as outlined in the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022. The committee has therefore directed financial institutions to freeze assets and report any transactions related to the individuals and entities to the NSC and the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit. The freezing obligation required above shall extend to all funds or other assets that are owned or controlled by the designated persons and entities, and not only those that are tied to a particular act, plot, or threat of terrorism or terrorism financing. The list was approved by the President upon the recommendation of the Attorney General of the Federation. These and more will be our focus on Nigeria today. Thanks for joining us. I am Ikaria Clinton. With me in the studio for the conversation is Dr. Sadiq Hassan. He's a strategic security expert. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us in the studio is Ahmed Abubakar Tanimu. He's a legal practitioner and also a former banker and a public affairs analyst. It's good to have you on Nigeria today.
Always a delight being here.
Yeah. Now, I'll start with you, Dr. Sadiq. Tell us, we hear about terrorism financing. Now, talk to us, what does this really mean and how does it really work?
Thank you very much for that. Terrorism is a national security issue all over the world because of the actions and the outcome of the activities of terror. No one will be left if the actions take place. Government, private, individual, old and young. Imagine, for example, a national secretariat today, federal secretariat, an act of terrorism take place. You could see that the effect and the impact is all encompassing. That is why it's bordering on national security. Now bringing it to financial aspect of it, there are peoples and agencies who engage in this illicit financing, where their financial activities has been linked and traced and tracked and analyzed to the extent is bordering on terrorist financing. So on that purpose, government has come with a lot of laws and acts that if you are found by tracing, tracking and analyzing by NFIU, which has that responsibility, that okay, these organizations, this individual, through the account that they have in commercial bank, both locally and internationally. So on this purpose, you could see that government now has responsibility to make sure those who have been on the watch list and have been found in this area, their account are subject to be freezed and tried. They don't just pick an account. There are certain transactions you made today. The bank has obligations and right to report to NFIU. It's suspicious transactions. If, for example, you have a savings account, which the minimum transaction should take place there shouldn't be up to a certain amount of money, and humongous amount of money arrive in that account or transferred, it is subject to be analyzed on the basis of origin and the end part of it. What is it meant for? Where the CBN, if it comes to issue of international, if an example is someone send money from abroad into Nigeria or from Nigeria across the country, when the money arrives, the government through the bank has responsibility to see that what this money is meant for. On that purpose, if it is not clear through the tracking and tracing and analyzing, if it now link that this aspect is bordering on terrorism financing, then you are called to be questioned. That is why certain transactions, if it comes, the bank will invite you to come and explain, or they refer you to the agency who has that responsibility to look into that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Sadiq. Now, Ahmed Abubakar, now talk to us from the legal, point of view. What actually constitutes, terrorism financing?
Thank you very much. I align myself with what Dr. has said. He has actually laid the foundation and has given an expose of terrorism on one aspect and financing on the other aspect. Financial institutions are in the business of financial intermediation, and in that process, they are able to make transactions happen. You engage in businesses, and all the businesses ought to be consummated through the financial institution. Terrorism can only thrive when there is financing for you to produce bombs, for you to have suicide and bombers and the rest. It all involves financing. And where do they get those monies from? We are talking of humongous amount of money. Only recently, we saw the congressman making reference to USAID, how certain amount of the monies that ought to go to African aid have been channeled into terrorism finance. So you ask yourself, where do those money, how did they get to the roots, to the people actually involved in it? It's through accounts of various individuals. You'll be shocked. You go to a bank, you see a single individual having up to 100 accounts, and you ask yourself, why do you need 100 accounts? They are trying to, the terrorism financing is equally tied to money laundering, because if you are doing what is legal, any money that comes to your account has an origin and it has a purpose. Maybe I must have done a transaction with you, I want to pay. Maybe you are my friend or a family member of mine, I want to send remittances from abroad. It is for a particular purpose. So if you are now receiving huge amount of money into your account that you cannot explain the source and you cannot explain the purpose, then ordinarily the table will now turn. It will now be based on the provision of section 54 of the Prevention and Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act. You are not supposed to wait for the act to happen, the terrorist act, because we know the consequences. So now you are being prevented proactively. It is the duty of the financial institution to report to relevant agencies for you to come and give account that there is a 1 billion naira in your account. It is for maybe building a refinery. What is the nexus between the person that sent the money and you that you are building the refinery?
Okay, having said that, are there loopholes, in our banks that makes it easy for terrorists to move money?
A lot of loopholes. A lot of loopholes. You see, the first loophole is that we have active collusion and connivance of the operators of the bank, particularly the compliance unit and the top management level. If you look at recently the Arms Gate or the Desuki Gate scandal, and a lot of various organizations, individuals, we all receive funds. All those ones were channeled through financial institutions. Instead of those financial institutions to be sanctioned severely, individuals were sacrificed, and because of even doing their job or saying the truth that certain amounts that came in ought to be reported. There's a control system. Unfortunately, Nigeria, what we are good at is to circumvent the control system. If because individuals are the ones that operate that system, there's a limit to which an individual can do. So maybe at times they will just cascade it to say, okay, an account should, any transaction above 10 million. The loophole now is that what they will do is that they will be depositing 9,998 naira. Then they will do it in channels. So that individual that has pegged the limit to 10 million, for him to be able to know which one is suspicious, he will never know, because individuals now, the account officer in this regards, and with the coalition of others, they've been able to layer such kind of transaction that you will not see. And in some banks, some very big name bank that you think that are good banks, they participate actively in that scheme, because it's like free money. They will see a suspicious transaction, they will not remit it. It got so bad that the CBN said any of such funds should be remitted to the CBN for warehousing. most banks, they keep such money, and this money, they run into billions, hundreds of billions of naira.
Thank you very much, Tanimu. Now back to you, Dr. Sadiq. Now, why is it important, to disrupt the flow of funds, to these terrorist groups?
Yes, because in fact, that is the area I am saying that the government has not done enough from the angle of security strategic experts. Why I say so? You are not supposed to allow dollar to fly within your country, where it becomes as usual as a currency like naira. You don't go to UK today and see naira flying about. You don't go to America and see naira. Such transactions are supposed to be made through electronic transfer. If you have USAID, a lot of NGOs today who come into Nigeria try to execute one thing or the other. All money they come into should come through the system. While you give them equivalence in naira, they have to spend it in naira. There's level of, you don't see a foreign currency, it should be against the law. This is where I said the government has not done very well. You cannot be in a position of a $10,000 cash, even to $20,000 cash, where government officials spend prefer dollar than even your own home currency. It's against financial regulations and all that. And these are ways and means that people now use to finance terrorism and all sorts of acts. So government should become with a policy whereby if you have a hard currency, dollars, pounds, it should be in a card and give to you. If you need to spend it, you spend it in that country. If it is here, the financial institutions should change it in equivalence of naira and give it to you. That is going to reduce. So, but because government has not been able to take that angle, how do we solve it? You could still see that the issue of terrorists is still thriving. Recently, the Chief of Defense Staff clearly said in the media chat with Al Jazeera, specifically, that most of the terrorists they caught were in the possessions of hard currency. How did they get it? Who gave it to them? The essence is because those money are easy to carry. You could see that if you are holding $10,000 and by the time you change it into naira, the volume, you cannot take it. So they prefer taking such amount of money. Government should be able to come back and say, no, you cannot take hard currency within the country. It should not be seen. If you go to UK today or you go to America, you cannot be seeing naira, another country currency, in their country to a large amount of money. It is against their financial regulations. This is where Nigeria needed to come in and said, from now onward, so amount of money, you cannot be in the possessions of it because of so and so. At that time, we can say government has taken the right step.
Thank you very much. We'll take a breather here. The conversation will continue after the break. Don't go away.
The implementation of the ruling is also dependent on another aspect or another arm of government.
Nowhere in the world will allow under digital economy for banks not to be dispensing domestic currency in that economy.
What will make this one different?
We want to know what they do as occupation. All of these are attributes that are questions have been designed to investigate.
In a few days to come, you see that they are all around their own crannies and everywhere in Nigeria, telling people to cooperate.
Welcome to Nigeria Today. Welcome back. This is still Nigeria Today, and we're looking at tackling terrorism financing. And of course, I have two gentlemen here in the studio with me. Now, Tanimu, of course, we have quite a lot of laws. We have laws and policies, that are, trying to combat some of these acts. Now, how effective have they been in actually trying to combat, in this case, terrorism financing?
Basically and generally speaking, it has not been effective, because if you look at the success of all such kind of laws, borders on implementation. The hue and cry about this recent event is basically on Simon Ekpa and most of the Biafra, but we have another leg to it. We have terrorism thriving in the northern states and in all parts of the country. And who are those responsible for the financing? Our financial institutions are culpable. When we have a central bank that ought to be regulating what banks are doing, we have a situation that reverse is the case. The owners of banks are more powerful in the real context than the regulators because they play key role in determining and framing.
Are you speaking now as a former banker?
I'm speaking now as a former banker and somebody
with,
that
with
knows
facts.
The facts are glaring. Why will the CBN be regulating ATM, even though it's not related, but you see that why are you encouraging armchair banking? How many banks have been sanctioned severely? How many banks have had their licenses revoked for enabling terrorism financing? These transactions are rooted through banks. A lot of banks are.
So what do you think should be done to
severe sanctions? Their licenses should be revoked. People should go to jail. The laws are there. You see, when you make laws and there's nobody that is being punished, you are not sending the right signal that there are consequences. Some people, they look at, I've seen instances where banks will deliberately violate laws and they know that the sanction is not as commensurate to the benefit. If you can keep a 5 billion naira inflow that came into the country, this is in public domain, is in public knowledge. 5 billion came in suspicious transaction and the bank has kept that money in their coffers for the past 5 years, using it to trade. No interest is being paid to anybody, and the CBN is not taking charge, and the bank will just keep it. At the end of it all, maybe they will ask them to return it to the source or to forfeit it to the government. They will still make. Do you know that for every day that you keep that 500 billion, do you know the amount of profit if you take it at the prevailing interest rate? A lot of banks are doing this. The money, they will warehouse it in the bank. It's cheap money, free money. They are not looking for depositors' money anymore. Terrorists are financing the activities of some of the.
So how do we combat this issue?
Simple.
Because we know there are a lot of challenges.
We know the sources. Regulators should begin to perform their role. Here, the CBN. I think to be fair to the CBN, it seems the activities of regulation is so humongous. They need to up their game. That's why we are not happy when they now delve into the regular banking activity, like engaging in commercial banking, along with those that they ought to be regulating. They need to do more in terms of severe sanctions on all or any bank that is found culpable. It's not enough for you to receive such money. What steps, what practical steps have you taken? How many people have gone to jail for aiding such kind of transaction?
Oh, okay, now back to you. From the security point of view, what role does intelligence gathering, play in trying to identify, funding networks?
Yeah, intelligence is key. That is why you have the NFIU. Just as you said, the NFIU are to detect and make recommendations. But implementations is the problems. Because NFIU is not a bank, but they have what it takes to analyze the source and the information that has been given to them. Another example, where information is not given to them, and later, how did they sanction the institutions who did not give them information? Because the law is there that any amount of money to so level, report it. There are cases, by clarifications, your account will be released because they've been able to see. Just as I've said, if you're operating a savings account and 1,500 million just landed in that account, and the bank now reported to NFIU, NFIU now have responsibility to call you. Possibly you sell your property. There are documents that shows you own this is why the money came. They release it. But the one that arrived, just as it mentions, and the bank keep it, what action did they do? So this is where intelligence is key. Because if you don't put intelligence at the toe to make sure, then certain things will be taking place. So they need to be proactive. The idea is to prevent it, not allow it to happen. Because when it happens, we are all in it. This is the essence of intelligence.
Now, back to you, Tanimu. You've mentioned quite a lot of challenges that we have been faced with in terms of, terrorism funding. Now, what new strategies do you think can be adopted for us to, well, if not eradicate, but reduce to the barest minimum the terrorism, financing, because you see quite a lot. Truth be told, you see quite a lot of these terrorists, the kinds of weapons they have. When you see them with the weapons, even the security operatives somehow seem to be overwhelmed.
Absolutely. So, you see, when you have this kind of a problem, you just need to be very practical. You go to the roots, you go to the source. If you go to Wuse Market, Wuse Zone 4, the volume of transaction that goes on there is quite alarming. We are talking of billions in dollars, and are we ready for it? When you know that they are not accountable, the security agencies, the EFCC, the NIFU, the DSS, they should have capacity of having CCTV camera they should make the market to be formal, so that people that are even coming to exchange, we should now have a trail. There's no cash trail right now. That's why we have dollarization of the economy. Most transactions are going on in a dollarized form. Dollars everywhere. You go to the hinterland, you go to Zamfara, you go to where you cannot even walk, you see people having dollars. How did they get it? We need to really focus more to encourage electronic transactions. And what the CBN, I'm now making it, what the CBN are doing is to kill electronic transactions by increasing the charges. Banks are already making humongous money for the mere fact that you are keeping your money in the bank. The idea of all the excuses of saying for maintenance.
So what new strategies, in your opinion, should be adopted?
All stakeholders should come on board. We should reduce dollarization of the economy. There should be severe sanctions, starting from our politician that moves around with a suitcase filled of. How can somebody be moving with close to $1 billion in his? It's crazy. What are they doing with such kind of money? There should be severe sanctions. Security, they should be able to make on-the-spot arrests, and you should give account. Why are you moving with a suitcase filled with high denomination of dollars? You should give account. There should be more proactive action in terms of arrests, in terms of prosecution, in terms of severe consequences on all our financial. What I'm saying, it happens in almost all the financial institutions. The CBN needs to now up its game in terms of the role it was statutorily established to do. You need to supervise. We need to regulate. We shouldn't have armchair banking in our bank. Then we now have armchair supervision. In the sense that they just come in, they are just presented with data. They do not go through the back end to know all these transactions. They just wire them in, and nobody knows. And you see a young boy is having a 2 billion,
Thank you.
3 billion in his account.
Thank you very much, Tanimu. Now, Dr. Sadiq, now
yes.
talk to what's how can public awareness and citizens' involvement contribute to cutting terrorism financing? Because the people also have to know, and they also have a role. So how can this help?
Yeah, it is time for the agency of government who are charged with this responsibility to have a Department of Information's escalations. For example, too, those people who have been listed, government need to make it out publicly. Arrest has to be made, prosecution has to take place. That will also create awareness, because there's nothing wrong for those agencies to come up presenting these are what constitute to financing, that terrorism financing, that everybody will be getting to know. If, for example, today you own a company, somebody call you and say, please, so money will be transferred into your company, your name, if it come, it belongs to me, somebody is sending it. These are illegal ways of where financing terrorism and all that, because your company never did any job. How can money come into that name? So the bank, they are aware, but it is now for this agency to continue bringing information, collaborating with other government agencies to make sure people get awareness, so that preventions can be able to be up to that.
So if you see something, you say something.
If you see something, you say something. And finally, the Terrorism Act, it affects all of us. Nobody will be left out if it takes place.
Thank you very much. This is where we draw the curtain for today's episode of Nigeria Today. A very big thank you to Ahmed Abubakar Tanimu, a legal practitioner and also a former banker and a public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution. And also we had Dr. Sadiq Hassan, who is a strategic security expert. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of the program. Remember, Nigeria Today airs every weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTA News 24. You can also check out this episode and others on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. I am Victoria Clinton. Goodbye.